everyone. We're back. Some of us have been on stage more than once. So this topic is going to be on the future of decentralization, which is pretty broad, but Pedro told me we could talk about whatever we want. So that's what we're going to do. Before we dive in, would you each just introduce yourselves really briefly, name, organization, and then we'll start with questions. Min?
Hi, I'm Min, and I'm a contributor at BitDAO currently and investing at Marana Ventures, and I'm also a consultant at SushiSwap.
Hi, David Namdar again, with Coral Capital and co-founder of NFT.com.
Hi, I'm Mike Miglio. I was a digital securities attorney for 4 years, and now I am the founder of Bridge Mutual, which is a DeFi insurance protocol.
My name is Luke Stokes. I'm the managing director for the Foundation for Interwallet Operability.
Okay, so before we begin, by a show of hands, does everybody who feels like they're very familiar now with what decentralization means? So actually not that many people. Luke, how about you start us off with your definition of decentralization?
Decentralization, when we're doing with EOS DAC, we're building the DAC factory, building tools for building DACs and DAOs. And we like to say no single point of failure. So that is also kind of broad, but it essentially just doesn't mean that there isn't one thing, if that goes away, the whole system breaks down. It's sufficiently decentralized. It's on a spectrum. So there isn't a 1 or 0 type situation. It's going to be somewhere within this range of no single point of failure.
And blockchain provides this.
Some do, some don't. They're all in different situations. You know, Binance Smart Chain has 20 nodes. Maybe that's enough, maybe not. You know, EOS has 21 that are rotated in by backups. Ethereum has a bunch of nodes. You got mining pools that are somewhat centralized, somewhat decentralized. It's a very complicated conversation.
So, Mike, why is decentralization important now and in the future?
I think in the grand scheme of things, the more decentralized we are, we put our faith and our trust into code, which is transparent, as opposed to centralized points of power, which is often opaque. Take most governments in the world. And the idea is that creates a more fair system for all versus benefiting the few that happen to be in the position of power that they are.
So as we're looking into the future of decentralization, there's obviously a lot going on with Web3, which we discussed. We just got done with the panel on the metaverse. In the future, what are your aspirations for what will be available and what kind of innovation will be unfolding? I'll give this to David.
So I guess it's always good to start off with like a history and think about where we're coming from, right? And so the problem with a lot of things, like whether it's countries or industries, and is that with centralized authority, everything has been we've had a lot of roadblocks, and everything has kind of been inefficient, right? And that's led to a lot of income disparity and a lot of other problems. And so what excites me about this vision of the decentralized future is that it really is helping move to this more meritocratic world where one of my favorite things to bring up now is Metakoven, who's famously known for buying the Beeple for $69 million. He gave this podcast and he said that what crypto is creating is the new America. And what he meant by that was that this new future, whereas everyone in the past came to America for economic freedom and religious freedom and up to a land of opportunity, that's what crypto and this decentralized world has become. That anybody can, as soon as they choose to become a part of this, right, they're on an equal footing with everybody else, and the ability to start new projects, to participate, to point their funds to new decentralized protocols. It's a really special thing, and I'm excited about kind of where that's taking us.
Thank you. Min, as a writer and advisor, what are you seeing in terms of conversation around people in the industry talking about where decentralization is going? And take this however you want to take, from a tech standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, ethics. Ethics are something that I wish people in technology would talk about more.
Yeah, I think we see, for example, there are a lot of things on Twitter happening, and people in a decentralized finance world are really incentivized to spread smear campaigns about core contributors to get them fired by the community, and that is really horrible, especially since as a contributor to a lot of DeFi projects, I can kind of see what's happening behind the curtain and how much time and energy like the C-level executives of many of these top DeFi projects are just putting into what they're doing. And the fact that people can incentivize these smear campaigns, publicize them and decrypt and wreck, it's just heartbreaking. So I think that decentralization is good, but we just need to understand that there's a lot of fake news out there, and to decentralize governance, we also need to like be able to share both sides equally and have like an arbitrator when there are two different camps within any sort of foundation or any DeFi project, and really just be fair around telling the truth around both sides.
Yeah, there are definitely some ugly things that happen in in communities, not just crypto or blockchain communities, but with the good comes the bad. Something that we touched on in a panel earlier, which I think is very relevant to this conversation, is DAOs. Luke, would you walk us through what DAOs are and kind of share your perspective on where you think that's going and why they're going to be so important moving forward?
I'm very, very passionate about DAOs. I first was involved with actually helping build them in 2018 with EOS DAC. We're one of the block producers that launched the EOS network, and we built the DAC factory, trying to create factories for DACs. And that was really important, specifically in the EOS community, because all the contracts there were mutable, meaning you could modify them. So the question was, okay, how do you protect those? Multi-million-dollar tokens and contracts and things of that nature. And so we created a situation where we have what's called a multi-sig. So multiple people have to agree on a certain threshold to make any changes to that contract. Well, then the next question is, well, how do you pick who's on the multi-sig? So you actually need a voting mechanism. This is where the DAO comes in, a DAO being a group of people with a shared goal and a mechanism for basically electing the admins of sorts for that group and putting them in some type of position about on-chain control, either controlling the funds or controlling the contracts. And I do think, as we were talking earlier, I do think that the future, probably next year, is going to be the year of the DAOs. We're going to realize that the centralized companies can't move as quickly as the wisdom of the crowds. They can't move as quickly as a whole bunch of people that are financially excited and incentivized to do something that's in their own best interest and in the best interest of the whole network. So I think DAOs are going to be really disruptive, especially in governments and nonprofits, but then eventually in companies as well. As I said, I'm the managing director for FIO. The FIO protocol runs as a decentralized autonomous consortia. We have 30 to 40 worker proposals that's done through the steering committee and the board. And so it's been running very well for a couple of years. And I think people are going to start seeing more examples of effective DAOs and say, why aren't we doing it that way? Shapeshift, famously just recently decentralized as it became more like a DAO. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future because you have that transparency as far as how they're using the funds, and you have the transparency about what they're going to do going forward.
Luke said it very well. He's really eloquent and well versed on the subject. And what he brought up in the beginning, he alluded to it, which is that there's diversity or decentralization is a spectrum. And I think that, well, you mentioned that DAOs would get more and more efficient and maybe faster than centralized companies are when you have a lot of people focused on one goal and they're sharing a common incentive, which I agree with. But getting up to that point, scaling to decentralized enough so that no one small group's interest in the DAO outweighs the better good or the common good of the DAO is a difficult process. It's something that we're doing right now as well at Bridge Mutual, is we're scaling up the number of holders we have and the number of people that are incentivized to make the protocol work in the protocol's best interest and not just themselves. Because what we see in early DAOs that don't have enough holders, if the owners of the protocol or the founders of the protocol release the protocol to the public too early, you have a lot of people who take selfish action. Like the first thing they'll vote into power is, let's give all the treasury tokens to the current token holders, right? So it really takes a long time actually to scale the community up big enough to have a good amount of devs and a good amount of people who have real world professions like lawyers and accountants and people with political ties and stuff in the DAO to promote its better interest in the grand scheme of things. So it's really interesting to watch these things grow. And I think over the next 3 years, we're going to start seeing DAOs actually compete with real world companies in industries like insurance, for example. It's a real coming thing.
Yeah, so actually, I think it's really important to know, everything is happening on a spectrum, right? Between centralization and decentralization. And really, the whole history of the world has worked that way between monarchies and communism and democracy and all that. And there's no right or wrong answer, and at different points in history we need different things. And so within the crypto space, it's played out that same way, that the whole world, we wouldn't be where we are today in crypto if everything was completely decentralized. We need some centralization. We needed centralized exchanges to be around and for them to onboard tens of millions of users in order to then have experimentation where once that capital was onboarded, people started getting comfortable taking it off the centralized exchanges, playing around with MetaMask and other wallets, and start then putting that into the decentralized world. And so going forward, like even within DAOs, the concept of DAOs have been around since 2013, 14, 15. And really just in the last couple of years, we've started to see people actually participate in the governance functions of DAOs. And so with some of them, the NFT space has led to a lot of innovation where it's kind of gotten people for the first time to care about actually participating in the governance and a lot of the DAOs and new kind of ecosystems that are being built. And so going forward over the next couple of years, it's going to be the same thing, that we're going to see movements towards decentralization, sometimes where we take a step back towards more centralized things, and then continue growth from there.
I think DAOs are unique, and a lot of the top DAOs don't have legal entities associated with them. And so I think that really causes a lot of issues with talent retention and also just policing around just like various rights that employees have against bullying, against like a lot of different things. So I think the best function of a DAO is really to elect some for-profit entities that can function and carry out certain like milestone-based tasks for the community and the foundation as a whole. But I don't think having no entity associated with the DAO is the right way to go, especially since a lot of the top DAOs are plagued with legal risks, and the individual contributors are targeted rather than the DAO or the corporation itself.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that. Often you see a legal wrapper for a DAO because there isn't structure in place. Even Wyoming, the law, which is kind of interesting, and actually just heard recently, we have a member of our community, Paul, who's doing some interesting things in terms of a sandbox for DAOs on the west side of the island in Rincon. Definitely talk to him if you get a chance. But there is that idea that any member of the DAO who does something could bring up about joint and several liability for everyone else in the DAO. Not a lawyer's, not legal advice, but it's just what I've been told. So having the right structures and having the different jurisdictions understand these structures is going to be really important for DAOs to really become more well-known and accepted. But the exciting thing is that I think it's starting. When I got to go to Panama, for example, I was at a dinner and Brock said, "Luke, come over here. And I sit down and he said, "Say that again." One of their person that worked for their banking commission was like, "Panama should run as a DAO." And it was just the most amazing moment for me because I've been working on this space for so long. And he said that in front of a bunch of other government employees, and they were very excited about that. So it's neat to see governments and people in government talking about this stuff already.
That leads me to my next and probably final question until before we open up the floor for questions. When it comes to real world use cases, right? I mean, I know we spent a lot of time talking about the metaverse and Web3 and just our avatars, and that is significant because there's no stopping it. It's just what's happening. But when it comes to real world use cases, are banks and government something that you see as, well, this is where we're going in the future. This is where we're going to start seeing blockchain and crypto create new infrastructure in a way that everyday people are going to benefit from?
I absolutely think so, because I believe that people want that transparency. They're sick of their governments cheating them. They're sick of these fees that are out of control on banking institutions. They want to see what's going on with their money, and they want to have access to actually participate in the governance for those situations. Now, apathy is probably one of the most dangerous things for a DAO, because if they don't make it easy and user accessible, they're just not going to participate. They want someone else to do it for them. So some people think DAOs have to be completely flat or completely hierarchy. I think there's a lot of experiments that need to happen. Liquid democracy, quadratic voting, there's a lot of different ways that you can position people that are passionate and even rewarded, such as Eden on OS, it's another really interesting governance model, to participate in the decision making. So once we kind of keep these experiments going, I do think we're going to find some ones that are just better, more efficient, and can evolve quicker than the traditional systems we've had in place for a long time.
Thank you.
Well, so I guess also if you think about like with shareholder voting today, proxy voting, and a lot of the things that happen at the government level of people not actually voting and participating in all different levels of elections, and so when I think about kind of the future and what a lot of the DAOs are enabling, it's really enabling and attracting people to participate and realize the power of individual voices to really help shape different systems. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of the experimentation that's happening actually start to affect some of those real world things at the kind of political level and kind of representing ownership of different companies and everything there.
You're good. Mike, do you want to comment on that at all?
Both well said. I agree. I think it's also another interesting point is that I think that just contributing to a DAO and being an active member in a DAO, I believe, will one day become a full-time job in a way that we haven't seen before. Oftentimes, contributors are rewarded by the protocols over time, and those who are more active, as the protocol begins to generate real-world revenue and compete with other businesses in the same industries, but from a decentralized level, we'll see people that are doing traditional jobs, but for decentralized protocols, and earning enough to really make a living, which is a topic that we didn't really have time to discuss. But it's something that really fascinates me, and I'm looking forward to it.